Hello everybody, I hope everybody had a good day. So today we're having the continuation from yesterday's lesson. So yesterday we talked about comparative adjectives and I mentioned that the next lesson is going to be superlatives. So today, excuse me, we're going to discuss superlatives. And you may ask yourself, what is a superlative? Well, a superlative is basically telling the person that you have reached the top, that you have reached the maximum. There is nothing more after that. That is the superlative in this case. So yesterday we were comparing two things. For example, we said that the apple is red, the rose is also red, but the apple is redder than the rose. In this case, we may have three things. We may have an apple, a rose, and a carnation, and we can say the apple is redder than the rose, but the carnation is the reddest of the three, meaning there is nothing with more red in that group. Now here, how do we distinguish the superlative from the comparative? We use the suffix est for short words and the phrase the most for longer words. Please pause and copy. Now, just as with the previous lesson, good and bad also fall in the category of irregular. So in the case for good, we say best, and in the case of bad, we say worse. So when there is nothing more and more and more good, bad English, we say is the best. When something is bad, 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 we say is the worst. So again, that's the thing, right? So we have best, we have better, and then we just have good. On this side, we have worst, we have worse, and then we just have bad. So those are the superlatives when we have reached the maximum or also the minimum. It depends on the perspective, just as with the lesson yesterday, we talked about less than. We may also use the superlative using the word least, but we won't touch that today. Here's an example. For example, we have apple, we have big apple, but then we have a third apple. If we look at the sizes, we have an apple, a big apple, but then we have the biggest apple. Notice that there is nothing else there that is bigger than the biggest. It is the maximum. Out of the three apples, there is nothing bigger. It is the biggest. So again, when we talk about the superlative means it's the maximum, it's the top. There is nothing else. Please pause and copy. All right, so this applies to things, this applies to people, this applies to anything we want to say is the highest of the high or is the lowest of the low. Again, noting that is the maximum. Let's look at a picture. Now we have a picture with 5 individuals. The number on top represents their age, and then we have their name. Annabelle is 19 years old. Sam is 25 years old. Lee is 45 years old. Ali is 32 years old. Emma is 27 years old, and Carlos is 30 years old. Now, if I ask you, who is the oldest person in the picture, who do you think that is? Pause to answer. Okay, so who is the oldest person in this picture? The oldest person in this picture is Lee. Why? Because there is nobody else older than 45. And we know that 45 is bigger than any of the other numbers. Thus, Lee is the oldest person. Now, if I were to ask you, who is the youngest person in this picture, what would you say? Pause to answer. The oldest person in this picture, the youngest person in this picture would be Annabelle. She is 19, and 19 is the smallest number in this picture, right? So here we see how the superlative works. We look at the entire group, and we compare them to each other. For example, who is the oldest male in this picture? Once again, who is the oldest male in this picture? The oldest male would be Sam. He is 32 years old. From the 3 men, he has the higher age. He's 32. Now, who is the tallest person in the picture? The tallest person in the picture is Carlos. You can see that his head is above everybody else's. So this is how superlatives work. We look at who has the highest or who has the lowest. Once again, if I were to ask you, who is the shortest person in this picture, what would you say? We can safely say that Lee is also the shortest person in this picture. So, Lee is the oldest and Lee is the shortest. Now, with Carlos, he is just the tallest. So he's not older than Lee, he's just taller than Lee, and he's tallest. That means nobody else is taller than Carlos. All right. What else can we say about this picture? If you notice, 3 people have curly hair, right? But now, one of them has the curliest hair. So, who do you think has the curliest hair? In that opinion, I will leave it up to you. All right? So, the next activity will involve you listening, and trying to identify the features of comparison versus superlative. So once again, remember, the superlative tells you the highest point, the thing that has the most, the beefy one. If you have any questions, please write them down and you may ask them to our guest teacher. Also, you may leave them on the comments box if you have a chance. All right, so activity 65. Listen to the story, write it down. Once you're done writing it, underline the comparative adjective and circle the superlative, right? So you have done this many times before. So I'm going to tell you the story, you're going to write it down, and then at the end I will show you the spelling so you can check your spelling. For guest teacher, please go over some of the vocabulary so the students will look uh, at the writing, at the story, and then they will point out which words are new to them. So basically go line by line and explain to them the meaning of each of the words that they may ask you. All right, so let's start with the dictation. 3, 2, 1. China is a nation in Eastern Asia. China is a nation in Eastern Asia. It is home to the largest human population with 1.42 billion inhabitants. It is home to the largest human population with 1.42 billion inhabitants. It is also the country with one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. It is also the country with one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth. The Chinese civilization's written history is roughly 3,500 years old. The Chinese civilization's written history is roughly 3,500 years old. China is a geographic giant. However, it is not the largest country. China is a geographic giant. However, it is not the largest country. Russia is bigger than China in landmass. Russia is bigger than China in landmass. A country that is comparable in population is India. A country that is comparable in population is India. India's population is 1.39 billion people. India's population is 1.39 billion people. Thus, China is more populated than India by 0.03 billion people. China has also been one of the most advanced civilizations in human history. China has also been one of the most advanced civilizations in human history. They developed things such as the printing press, paper, money, noodles, and gunpowder. They developed things such as the printing press, paper, money, noodles, and gunpowder. Arab merchants would travel through harsh terrains to obtain the finest silk and the most adorned porcelain wares from there. Arab merchants would travel through harsh terrain to obtain the finest silk and the most adorned porcelain wares from there. The reason we call porcelain China is because of its origins there. The reason we called porcelain China is because of its origins there. Romans saw Chinese goods as a status symbol. Romans saw Chinese goods as a status symbol. The most sought-after items were silk, porcelain, jade, and spices. The most sought-after items were silk, porcelain, jade, and spices. Chinese influence was not just limited to material goods. Chinese influence was not just limited to material goods. They were the most influential culture in Asia until the 19th century. They were the most influential culture in Asia until the 19th century. Chinese calligraphy was integrated into Japanese. Chinese calligraphy was integrated into Japanese. The most regarded philosopher from China is Confucius. The most regarded philosopher from China is Confucius. His ideas permeate the entire East Asian region. His ideas permeate the entire East Asian region. His teachings were spread all over the continent. His teachings were spread all over the continent. Confucius taught the importance of self-cultivation, temperance, respect, and sincerity. Confucius taught the importance of self-cultivation, temperance, respect, and sincerity. Although China is big and influential, it has had its issues. Although China is big and influential, it has had its issues. It also suffered through war, famine, and other turmoil. It also suffered through war, famine, and other turmoil. However, it has been able to pull through. However, it has been able to pull through. China has lasted longer than great empires like Rome or the British. China has lasted longer than great empires like Rome or the British. Today, it has a larger economy than the European Union. Today, it has a larger economy than the European Union. And it has surpassed Japan as the second largest economy in the world. And it has surpassed Japan as the second largest economy in the world. Only time will tell us how China will continue its path forward. Only time will tell us how China will continue its path forward. Now that we are done with the dictation part, here's the spell check. So take your time to go over the spelling and the punctuation. Hopefully everybody has a very high score. I'm expecting 100% like all the times, but we know we have our issues at times. I also just noticed a typo. It should be a comma after influential, not a period, but things happen. For our guest teacher, please give them time also to reread the story so they can find words that they may not understand. And then once that is done, please go line by line so they don't get lost and you don't get lost. And please explain to them whatever word they need or any phrase that they need. Once that is done, please read together with them. So, read the word, have them repeat, and so on and so forth. Once that is done, you may continue to the next activity. Now that you are done with the dictation part, you have underlined, you have circled, you have gone over the vocabulary, and you have read the story. Now it is time to do your own words. So write a piece where you tell us what is the most expensive store in your country, the hardest school to get into, the most common name for boys and girls, the biggest city, and the most famous artist from your country. So take your time to write down your answers. Once everyone is finished or mostly finished, you may share your answers with the group, just like we do every time, right? One by one. What do you have? Tell us and share.